The following presentation will be pertaining to guidelines for delivery of Chicago Mercantile Exchange futures for slaughter cattle. A par delivery unit is 40,000 pounds of USDA estimated yield grade 1, 2, 3, or 4 choice quality grade live steers averaging between 1,050 pounds and 1,200 pounds, with no individual steer weighing more than 100 pounds above or below the average weight for the unit. Total weight must be between 38,000 pounds and 42,000 pounds. Not more than 4 head of estimated yield grade 4 choice steers shall be permitted, and no individual animal weighing less than 950 pounds or more than 1,300 pounds shall be deliverable. Par delivery units containing steers with an average weight between 1,050 pounds and 1,125.5 pounds shall have an estimated average hot dressing percentage of 62%. Par delivery units containing steers with an average weight between 1,125.6 pounds and 1,200 pounds shall have an estimated average hot dressing percentage of 63%. Delivery units with an estimated average hot dressing percentage under par shall be acceptable at a discount of 1/2 cent per pound for each 1/2% or less, by which the estimated dressing percentage if under par. Units with an estimated average hot dressing percentage of less than 60% shall not be deliverable. All cattle contained in the delivery unit shall be healthy and in satisfactory condition to withstand shipment. No cattle showing a predominance of dairy breeding or showing a prominent hump on the forepart of the body shall be acceptable. Steers weighing from 100 to 200 pounds over or under the average weight of steers in the delivery unit shall be deliverable at a discount of 3 cents per pound, provided no individual animal weighing less than 950 pounds or more than 1,300 pounds shall be deliverable. Steers weighing more than 200 pounds over or under the average weight of the load are not acceptable. Estimated yield grade 4 choice quality steers up to and including 4 head are deliverable. No cattle with estimated yield grade 5 shall be deliverable. Delivery units containing not more than 8 USDA select grade steers may be substituted at a 3 cents per pound allowance for each select grade steer. No more than 8 select grades may be delivered. After cattle are surrendered for inspection and grading by the USDA personnel, the decision of the graders are final. A par delivery shall be made from approved livestock yards in Amarillo, Texas, Dodge City, Kansas, Greeley, Colorado, Omaha, Nebraska, and Sioux City, Iowa. Cattle delivered at Sioux City and Omaha must be confined in a secured pen prior to 12 noon on the day of delivery. Cattle to be delivered at Greeley must be in the yards no later than 12 midnight on the day of delivery and must stand overnight without feed and water prior to weighing. Cattle delivered to Dodge City and Amarillo must be in the yard no later than 9 o'clock in the morning and must stand thereafter without feed and water prior to weighing. All estimations for delivery of Chicago Mercantile Exchange cattle will be based and evaluated on live cattle grade standards. The various evaluation criteria one needs to make when grading slaughter steers to make quality and yield grade determinations are maturity, amount and distribution of fatness, firmness of muscling, adjusted fat thickness at the 12th rib, percent kidney fat, ribeye area, and carcass weight. Out of all of these, the amount and distribution of fat is the most important factor when making these grade determinations. One must look at the evidence of fat and fullness in the brisket, fat cover-up over the backs, ribs, rump, and tailhead. Prime cattle will have thick, full briskets. They'll show full cod and will usually be fat enough to have a shelvy look up over the back, flat over the top with a sharp break down their sides. They'll have large pones or patches of fat of each side of the tailhead. Choice cattle will also show evidence of fat in all evaluating locations. Briskets show evidence of thickness and fullness. Fullness in the cod, also fat deposits in flanks, pones, or patches of fat on both sides of the tailhead. When we see these patches, one should start thinking about the choice grade. As a rule of thumb, we can usually associate these pones with a 1/2 inch of fat cover at the 12th rib, and this 1/2 inch is about average fat thickness that most cattle will grade choice. Select grade cattle show some fat in most evaluating areas. The brisket has some slight plumpness or fullness, but has a paper cutter appearance. Flanks beginning to drop down some and barely show evidence of fat deposits. Standard cattle have very little fat anywhere. They show no evidence of fat deposits in the brisket and looks very much like the appearance of paper cutter. They are cut up severely in the flanks, show no evidence of cod fat, no fat cover over back, rib, rump, or tailhead. To evaluate yield grade, we evaluate varying fat thicknesses and corresponding yield grades. 0.0 inches fat equals 2.0. 0.2 inches fat equals 2.5. 0.4 inches of fat equals 3.0. 0.6 inches of fat equals 3.5. 0.8 inches of fat equals 4.0. And 1 inch of fat equals 4.5. 1.2 inches of fat equals 5.0. Once this is done, preliminary yield grade can be adjusted based on ribeye area and kidney fat. We adjust the preliminary yield grade plus or minus 0.3 of a yield grade for each inch one thinks the steer has above or below normal muscling. Move the preliminary yield grade with a minus factor toward yield grade 1 if he has superior muscling, and adjust it with plus if it has deficient muscling. Kidney pelvic heart fat is the next evaluation adjustment we must make. The average KPH in all slaughter steers is about 2.5% of its hot carcass weight. Normal is considered to be 3.5%, and we adjust the preliminary yield grade 0.1 for each 0.5% that the KPH is from the normal of 3.5%. If we just do nothing but plug in minus 0.2 adjustment for kidney pelvic heart, we should be close. When evaluating, look at a steer from directly behind the animal. In your mind, cut the steer's legs off just above the hock, and all you would see in your mind is the rear silhouette of the body. If it looks like a circle or has a barrel look, it is muscular and trim. If it looks like an inverted triangle, like a highway danger sign, it is thin muscle. And if it looks like a square box, it is excessively fat. Furthermore, the concept of frame size can be helpful in grading. Through various research studies, we have learned that large frame steers usually will not have the fatness and weight to grade choice until it weighs over 1,200 pounds. Medium frame type steers are usually between 1,000 and 1,200 pounds, and small frame steers under 1,000 pounds. Now let's take a look at several individuals. The first redneck steer, we can see some fullness and thickness in his brisket. We see that he has developed fat cover-up over his back and patches of fat on each side of the tail. This steer will be estimated to be a low choice yield grade 2 and would be acceptable on a Chicago Mercantile Exchange delivery. This redhorn steer has some slight fullness of the brisket, but as we look at his front, he has that paper cutter appearance discussed earlier and does not show a lot of fat up over the top and has only a small amount of fat around the tail head. This would be a select grade yield grade 2 steer and would be acceptable. The next red limousine steer has definitely got a paper cutter appearance in the brisket area. Lacking any fullness, he shows no evidence of fat covering over the top or patches around the tail head. However, he does show a lot of natural muscling. He would be considered a standard yield grade 1 and would not be acceptable. When looking at all three steers together, we can obviously see differences in the choice, select, and standard grades. The first thing that is noticeable when viewing this steer is his superior amount and thickness of muscling. Although, when viewing from behind, we see that he has no pones around the tail head and no fullness of cod. When viewing from the front, we see a very narrow brisket. He will be graded as a select yield grade 1, and he would be accepted. This steer combines superior muscling and fat thickness, showing fullness of brisket and fat cover in all other evaluating areas, and would be graded choice yield grade 2 and acceptable. When viewing this steer, we see plumpness and thickness in the brisket, and also pones around the tail head. A steer that will be graded a typical choice yield grade 3 and acceptable. This steer shows us that tabletop or shelf look up over the top, fairly large patches around the tail head, fullness and plumpness in cod area. Showing this much fat, this animal would be graded a high choice yield grade 4 and accepted. However, only 4 head of this type per load would be acceptable. This next steer has the very square box look and has the look of being excessively fat. Very full plump brisket, large pones around the tail head, and a flat top look over the back. He would be considered primed yield grade 5, and yield grade 5s are not acceptable. When we view all 5 of the previous steers together, one can see the yield grade differences from yield grade 1 through 5. This black Brahman cross steer is tall and lanky. He would be considered to be a large frame type animal. He does not show a great deal of fat thickness or cover in any of the evaluating areas. He shows very little patches of fat around either side of the tail head or cod area. Furthermore, a steer that shows very little plumpness of thickness of muscling. He will be graded a select yield grade 3, but would be accepted. Another large frame type steer, but is showing a lot more evidence of fat cover than the previous steer. This individual combines superior muscling and fat thickness and will be graded a low choice yield grade 2 and acceptable. This is a medium frame type steer, which shows us quite a bit of fat around the tail head, which is a good indication of around 1/2 inch of fat over the 12th rib. A steer that shows us about normal amount of muscling for his size and would be considered to be an average choice yield grade 3 and would be acceptable. This small frame type Hereford steer is another individual showing evidence of fat cover in all evaluating areas with a normal amount of muscling for his size. He would be graded a choice yield grade 3 and acceptable. This black cross steer is a large frame type steer showing some evidence of fatness, however, a steer which is deficient in muscling and narrow through his round when viewing from behind. With this slight amount of fat thickness, he would be considered a low select yield grade 3. This individual would be accepted, however, he would be called a double dipper in most cases as he would be graded a select and would be overweight on most loads. $3 per hundred would be discounted for the select grade and $3 discount for the fact that he was 100 to 200 pounds over the average load equals a $6 per hundred discount for this individual. This red Brahman steer would not be acceptable due to the prominent excessive hump. He would be graded a select yield grade 3. About a 3-inch hump is the maximum amount of hump which is acceptable. This choice yield grade 3 Brahman steer would be acceptable, and this would be the maximum amount of hump allowed. He will be considered to have less than a 3-inch hump, which is allowable. As we look at these 2 Brahman steers together, we can see the obvious differences in the humps. This black steer would not be acceptable because of the coarse, staggy characteristics. As we look at him from the front, we can see coarse, staggy-looking head and a full crest, which we usually associate with stag or bull characteristics. This Holstein cross steer will not be acceptable because of too much Holstein or dairy breeding. He shows obvious color of Holstein, thin angular overall muscling, and body shape which is normally associated with dairy breeding. The next steer, even though showing some signs of Holstein cross, would be acceptable because he shows more signs of beef breeding as evidenced by the overall plumpness and thickness of muscling and body shape, which is normally associated with cattle with a high percentage of beef breeding. He would be graded a choice yield grade 3. As we look at these 2 Holstein cross steers together, we can see the difference in overall muscling and type. The next steer will be graded a select yield grade 3, but not accepted because he is crippled and does not travel correctly. Any steer that is stiff or crippled and cannot withstand shipment will not be accepted. The red Limousine cross steer is double muscled and would be undesirable. A steer that would grade standard and not acceptable. Although he shows superior amount of muscle and thickness, these types of cattle do not have the ability to produce carcasses with acceptable degrees of meat quality. This Brahman Holstein cross steer shows no evidence of fat covering in any evaluating areas. This steer is deficient in natural muscling with little or no thickness in the rump and would be graded as standard and not acceptable. Now we can look at the process of making a physical delivery of Chicago Mercantile Exchange cattle. The grader will look and view the steers as they pass by one at a time, looking for any obvious type of reject or out cattle. The cattle are passed by usually twice for the grader to look at both sides. This particular load of cattle is a par delivery with no select grade or no over or under weights. The second load of cattle has 4 obvious out cattle. a stag, standard grade, obvious Holstein type, and a steer showing a prominent hump. These cattle must be taken off of the load. Also in this load, we have 4 select grade and 1 overweight cattle. After the 4 obvious cattle are cut off, the deliverer would be able to replace them with these 4 cattle in order to make weight, and the load would then be acceptable. This is why it is important to bring 3 to 4 head of choice grade cattle extra per load. This load, as it is passed by the grader, contains a stag, Holstein cross, a double-muscled, standard grade, yield grade 5, our prominent hump cattle, and steers weighing over 1,300 pounds. Some of these cattle were put in on the load that had been rejected off the previous load. This particular load will be rejected, and the deliverer will have to resort and get different cattle that will meet specifications. This load will be assessed a 50-cent per hundred penalty due to being rejected. This concludes our presentation on guidelines for delivery of Chicago Mercantile Exchange futures for slaughter cattle.